Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Absolute Resonance Part 5 based on novel. So let's start. With his excited emotions, Li Luo spent the whole night tinkering. When morning arrived, Li Luo rubbed his heavy eyelids whilst sitting in the attic. His gaze was staring expectantly at the wooden boxes before him. About half of the spirit liquids and purifying lights had already been consumed. He realized that he had neglected something important. Even though he had a blank palace and was unconcerned with the impurities, absorbing these treasures required time, and just chugging the whole lot in one go wouldn't work. In fact, this was actually counterproductive as these spirit liquids and purifying lights would interfere with each other. Hence, he was only able to absorb 27 portions. Of course, if anyone else heard of this matter, they would write Li Luo off as a complete madman. No one would ever engage in such debauchery. 27 spirit liquids and purifying lights in one night? Not only would it result in a massive heap of impurities, the individual's palace would likely be sealed off not too long after. Only people who were at the end of the road would deign to take such a wasteful and insane action. These people would succeed or die trying. It seems like the results aren't bad. Li Luo's regret over his mediocre results also naturally dissipated. His gaze brightened when he realized that the glow emanating from his first palace had become purer than before. Even his flowing resonant power seemed to have transformed, becoming even more vigorous and refined. At the rate he was going, Li Luo calculated that he would require another 100 portions of 4th grade spirit liquids and purifying lights to raise his water light resonance to the 5th grade. Upgrading his 4th grade resonance to the 5th grade would incur an approximate total cost of 200,000 sky gold. This sum was honestly something that Li Luo could still bear. However, the likely cost to temper his resonance again after that would be a little excessive. This was because 5th grade spirit liquids and purifying lights were multiple times more expensive. Additionally, the amount required to temper his resonance would also undoubtedly increase. By his calculations, raising his resonance from the 5th grade to the 6th grade would likely cost him about 1 million pieces of sky gold. And then from the 6th to 7th. That would be countless millions. What about after that? The thought of the resources required for Li Luo's tempering caused him to feel a little stifled. Although he wasn't directly managing things, he knew that House Loulan's yearly profits from managing every business was only a few million pieces of sky gold. Even if he swallowed up every existing asset that belonged to the house, it would be extremely difficult to raise his resonance to the 8th grade. This acquired resonance was basically a money-sucking black hole. Unknowingly, Li Luo started massaging his temples. Dad and Mom, the house you left behind isn't enough to support this wastrel. Though, if I'm able to refine my own spirit liquids and purifying lights, then I would be able to save quite a bit. At this very moment, Li Luo thought of his own waterlight resonance. From a certain point of view, this was also his strength. If he was able to develop his talent in it, it was very likely that the spirit liquids and purifying lights which he refined would be the best in the field. It looked like he would have to bring forward his plans to learn the arts of a resonance artificer. It looks like Mom and Dad considered this situation in great detail. This is why they wanted me to become a resonance artificer. Otherwise, I might very well be the one who truly destroys House Loulan from the inside. Li Luo sighed once again. He truly had to respect his parents' foresight. Li Luo did not continue thinking too much about this issue. In any case, he should just barely have the means to cover the costs of bringing his resonance up to the 6th grade. He would take things as they came. Hence, he shook his head to clear his mind and retired to his bedroom for some well-deserved rest. For the following 2 days, he continued to cultivate feverishly day and night. In the day, he would practice his flood meditation diagram till he had to stop. After which, he would spend 2 hours honing his resonance arts. To finish the day off, he would proceed to utilize spirit liquids and purifying lights to temper his resonance. His full-fledged efforts bore fruit. His resonant power quickly arose to the 4th seal stage and his 4th grade waterlight resonance became increasingly purified. It was at this point that Li Luo felt that he was on top of the world. Just what could stop his ascent to the very top? As it turns out, nothing too outlandish. Shortly after, things came to a screeching halt as he exhausted his store of spirit liquids and purifying lights, bringing his great hopes to a temporary pause. Within the old manor, inside the administrative office, Xia Wei was garbed in a long robe as she sat in front of the table. Her slender body was accentuated by her well-developed assets, which spilled forth from her chest, making her a remarkable sight. Currently, her beautiful, rounded face was filled with a frown as she examined a record before her. Manager Ji Yu, don't you think the decrease in the profits from the Jianshu province is a little severe? Xia Wei shifted her gaze from the record to the manager in front of her. The middle-aged man addressed as Manager Ji Yu bitterly smiled as he nodded. General Manager is right. House Loulan originally possessed 9 stores, 18 mines, and countless pharmacies. However, because of the instability within the house, the other 3 houses in the Jianshu province have redoubled their efforts to swallow up our interests in the past year. The Song family is the largest culprit. Out of the 9 stores we own, 2 of them were suppressed by them. They swallowed these businesses up when we were unable to maintain them. Xia Wei's gaze turned frosty after hearing this. House Loulan had built its foundation within the city of Southwind before ascending with utmost speed to become one of the Xia Kingdom's great houses. Within the Jianshu province, there were 3 other large families which House Loulan had to contend with. When one looked at things from the perspective of the Xia Kingdom, these 3 families could never have hoped to compare with House Loulan. However, within the Jianshu province alone, they were old powers with significant influence, deeply rooted and with solid foundations. When the 2 house lords were around, House Loulan was like the sun at its zenith. These 3 families were extremely shrewd and listened to every word from House Loulan. Who would have expected that once the house lords disappeared, they would immediately contest House Loulan's interests and start to rock the boat? Xia Wei had once heard from Jiang Qing'e that there was most likely an invisible hand behind the curtain guiding these 3 families. This was a supreme power that was constantly seeking to test House Loulan's bottom line and the truth of their situation. The families in the Jianshu province were known as the Song family, the Bei family, and the Differ family. The strongest amongst the 3 being the Song family. This was also the family that acted out the most during these past few years. They would utilize all sorts of means to suppress and to get a piece of House Loulan's businesses. One had to also know that the Song family's head would turn up to offer New Year's greetings each year without fail in the past. This 180-degree change in personality even seemed like an orchestrated play. Xia Wei, on the other hand, was an experienced soul and would not harbor any naive thoughts. House Loulan's existence had previously suppressed the interests of these 3 families. Now that the house was full of internal strife, having their feet stepped on was not without reason nor was unexpected. This was the price of doing business. Despite this, the situation was not the same as in the past. One had to treat the other party seriously as an enemy to prevent any further issues from arising. However, the current House Loulan was unable to deliver too much assistance to save the fire raging within the Jianshu province. Every location was under significant amounts of pressure, and with Peihao's existence being a constant time bomb, this was truly adding fuel to the existing inferno. With this dilemma on hand, Xia Wei was engrossed in deep thought, trying to figure out the best solution. Eventually, she came to a decision. Temporarily shutter all the businesses that are unable to operate. There is no need to tangle with the opponents. Knowing when to lie low was a necessity. Once the situation in House Loulan stabilized, these families would be forced to spit out every last bite they had taken. Hearing her decision, the few managers near her immediately acknowledged and proceeded to carry her instructions out. They too understood that the situation of House Loulan within the Jianshu province was not the most critical thing in the grand scheme of things. Knock, knock. At this point, someone knocked on the door to the office. Xia Wei instructed the knocker to enter, and when the door opened, a certain Li Luo strode right in. The managers immediately greeted him respectfully. Waving his hand to signal he wanted to speak to Xia Wei personally, the group of managers were ordered by Xia Wei to leave the room. Following which, her beautiful eyes affixed themselves on him. "Young lord, may I know if there are any problems?" Li Luo coughed lightly and smiled. Indeed. I seem to have run into a little problem which requires elder sister Cai Wei's assistance. Cai Wei's captivating eyes and willowy eyebrows blinked as she felt that something just didn't seem right. Still, she asked, what sort of problem? Li Luo, giving his most warm smile, replied without skipping a beat, honestly it's nothing new. Do you remember the 50 sets of spirit liquids and purifying lights? Well, I've sort of finished them all. Could I kindly trouble elder sister Cai Wei to assist me with procuring another 100 sets? The expression on Cai Wei's white and smooth egg-shaped face froze up a little. Her beautiful pupils continued to focus on Li Luo as her chest gradually began to heave up and down. Another 100 sets? All 4th grade. Her 2 palms were currently clenched extremely tightly. Just how long had it been since she started managing the Qianshu province's finances? Could it be that this was the day they were going to go bankrupt? Was she going to be the sinner of House Loulan, the one responsible for crippling its very foundation? Finally, she could no longer hold back her rampaging emotions, immediately slamming her first down angrily on the table before her, an expression full of fury. Li Luo! Are you trying to get me fired? Cai Wei's furious reaction scared the crap out of Li Luo, making him jump backwards in fright. Cautiously, he examined that round face, completely flushed red with anger. Naturally, he felt a little embarrassed as he quickly replied, "Why would you say such a thing, elder sister Cai Wei? Your exceptional abilities speak for themselves. Why would I want to get you fired?" Cai Wei continued to leer at Li Luo. It was a few good moments before she began to cool down. "My sincerest apologies, young lord. I spoke out of turn, so please forgive me." She then paused for a moment. "However, young lord, do you truly need another 100 portions of spirit liquids and purifying lights? This is no small matter. Furthermore, the young lord should also know that even though spirit liquids and purifying lights can temper one's resonance, they should not be used wantonly, or they will cause one's resonant palace to be sealed." Cai Wei knew of Li Luo's predicament of a blank palace and its sensitive nature, hence she did not wish to directly speak about it, to prevent her from hurting his feelings. She continued to ponder over the situation, then her gaze suddenly turned sharp. Could it be that someone is secretly extorting the young lord? Are they trying to take advantage of your status to obtain copious amounts of spirit liquids and purifying lights? Although every servant within the old manor had been carefully screened, there would inevitably be some who would develop some unfavorable intentions, considering how long his parents had been gone for. Spirit liquids and purifying lights were also precious goods that were often traded, hence this idea that Li Luo was being blackmailed didn't seem too outlandish. If this was the case, Cai Wei would definitely ensure hellfire fell upon that brave soul who dared to even try. Li Luo shook his head and seriously said, "Elder sister Cai Wei, there's no need to imagine things. It's just a fact that I require them for my own usage." Cai Wei's willowy eyebrows were raised curiously. "I'd like to apologize for overstepping my bounds, but may I kindly know what the young lord is doing with these spirit liquids and purifying lights? I'm not trying to interrogate you, my lord, but I am concerned that in your zeal to get stronger, you might have embarked on an incorrect path. If something did happen to you, I wouldn't be able to face Sister Qing'e." She knew that Li Luo's blank palace had brought him undue stress and that youths were prone to bull-headed decisions. Her only worry was that Li Luo had been tricked into some sort of snake oil scam to break through his shackles. Li Luo paused and deliberated for a moment before giving his reply. "I suppose there's no harm in letting elder sister Cai Wei know. My parents had left behind a secret art which allowed me to manifest a resonance of my own. Thus, the reason why I require the spirit liquids and purifying lights should be self-explanatory. This was a fact that would eventually come to light. People would definitely be curious as to what had happened. His parents leaving behind a secret method would truly be a great form of cover for the true reasons behind it. He would continue to need to purchase copious amounts of these tempering materials in the future, and these requests would have to run through Cai Wei anyways. It made more sense to quell her concerns immediately. Cai Wei was shocked. The two house lords left behind a secret art. This seemed unbelievable, so she remained partially unconvinced. However, as her eyes examined Li Luo, she noticed that he seemed absolutely calm. This didn't seem like a lie. Finally convinced, she nodded in agreement. Since this is the case, I will immediately proceed to carry out the young lord's instruction. Cai Wei softly sighed. These 100 portions of spirit liquids and purifying lights would likely cost hundreds of thousands of sky gold. Half of House Loulan's reserves in the Jiangsu province would be exhausted. This would definitely throw a wrench in her plans to contain the three families' covetous actions. However, she knew what her priorities were. Being able to strengthen Li Luo's resonances would also be worth sacrificing all of the businesses within the Jiangsu province. Li Luo glanced at Cai Wei's radiant and round face furrowed with a frown. Slightly embarrassed, he queried, "Have I caused elder sister Cai Wei some trouble due to my requests being too expensive?" She raised her head to look at him. His sheepish face seemed a little youthful and inexperienced, but he truly had inherited his parents' good looks. Lightly laughing at his expression, her mood lightened up. "This issue is truly slightly thorny, but it's not a huge problem. Young lord, you can rest assured that I will settle everything." Li Luo sighed with relief in his heart. 100 portions of these spirit liquids and purifying lights had already caused Cai Wei to be hard-pressed for a solution. He couldn't imagine what would happen in the future if that was the case. This was barely a drop in the bucket. Is House Loulan's headquarters unable to mobilize its capital? Li Luo asked. Cai Wei lightly nodded before she regretfully said, "Young lord, you should be aware of House Loulan's current situation. Adding to the fire was Pei House swallowing up 3 pavilions, which resulted in a third of our profits lost. This has only made matters worse." From her words, Li Luo easily read between the lines and knew that the headquarters was unable to assist. Nodding his head, he had no words to say regarding this, so he shifted the topic to more pleasant things. After things were smoothed out, the two parties left. Cai Wei stared at his leaving shadow, slightly lost in thought. This young lord didn't have a bad personality, he treated others warmly and without arrogance. Coupled with his good looks and talent, it was only a matter of time before he would resemble his dad, one who managed to captivate the hearts of numerous noble ladies throughout the entire Xia Kingdom. From a certain point of view, he truly was a good match for Jiang Qing'e. The only flaw was his blank palace, because ultimately in this world, everything relied on the basis of strength, whether it be wealth or influence. House Loulan was no exception. When Li Taixian and Tan Tailan were around, they were one of the 5 great houses, especially radiant in the eyes of all. A titan that no one would dare to offend. The moment they disappeared, the radiance gradually dimmed, to the point that even the elements were able to shake them. Jiang Qing'e, on the other hand, had immeasurable talent and a limitless future. She was even poised to break the Xia Kingdom's record for the youngest Duke stage cultivator. Until now, Li Luo's marriage arrangement was actually just a burden that held her back. For perspective, Cai Wei and Jiang Qing'e were actually bosom buddies who had met in the past, when Jiang Qing'e did not possess the icy personality she was known for today. Hence, she was also concerned for Li Luo as a friend. Especially since it was possible that Li Luo would have crumbled from the pressure of being tied to someone so extraordinary whilst being shunned as a cripple. Yet after she heard Li Luo's words about the House Lord's secret art, she felt a little relieved. Perhaps this could very well satisfy the deficiency in his blank palace, allowing their gap to narrow at least a little. Still, the distance would remain large nevertheless. As Jiang Qing'e's friend and one who often followed her as they traversed the situations of Xia City, she was distinctly aware of where Jiang Qing'e stood in terms of talent and ability. She was the absolute cream of the crop, one that even geniuses had to admire. Compared to that, the city of Southwind was merely just a drop in the ocean. Thinking of the upcoming challenges as a result, Cai Wei forcefully suppressed that roiling feeling in her heart and focused on the task ahead. Signaling for managers to come, she dispatched individuals to accomplish the task assigned to her by Li Luo. Under her supervision, the task was accomplished within half a day. Li Luo sighed in amazement at her ability to get things done as he stared at the 2 crates before him. Grabbing both of them, he immediately rushed back to his room. Over the remaining few days of leave, Li Luo spent all of his time cultivating and tempering his resonance. He had previously risen from the 3rd seal to the 4th seal in 2 days. This was because he had already accumulated the foundation to do so in the past and hence took little time. Moving from the 4th seal to the 5th seal thus required more time and was a little slower. Slower here was only in reference to the speed of the previous advancement. When there was 1 day left of his leave, Li Luo's resonant power finally made a leap and he fully entered the 5th seal stage. In addition to his resonant power rising, his 4th grade water-light resonance also finally finished absorbing the last of the spirit liquids and purifying lights, advancing a grade to the 5th grade. And as such, his leave came to an end. Dawn arrived and he slowly strode out of the old manor. Due to his increased resonant power, even his hair seemed to have gained a new luster, looking slightly silverish. Li Luo had a gleaming smile on his face as he faced the rising sun. This week had truly been life-changing for him, for he had left behind his previous bodily shackles and completely metamorphosed. The youth with the blank palace had now transformed into someone completely new. As he stood in the gateway, he stared at the direction in which Jiang Qing'e had gone a week ago and exhaled deeply. Astral Sage College, you will accept me. Only a week had passed since Li Luo had last returned here. However, it felt like it had been a lifetime since he last stepped within. Taking in the sights, he stared at the numerous people coming and going, the rowdy and cacophonous laughter, and also relished in the youthful vigor everyone exuded. At the same time, he also noticed that within the groups of people were countless curious gazes focused upon him. Unsurprisingly, he started to hear gossip centered around him. Isn't that Li Luo? He's finally back to school. About time. What's wrong with his hair? Did he dye it? He took a week of leave of absence the month before the final examinations. To do so willingly, perhaps the broken pot has now been completely shattered. I heard that Li Luo is about to withdraw from the academy entirely. Perhaps he won't even take part in the final examinations. Really? Taking in all the random rumors, Li Luo was left speechless. He had just disappeared for a week, but the rumors had only gotten more and more exaggerated. However, he was in no mood to entertain these clowns. He weaved his way past the crowd as he walked towards the 2nd school. Upon arriving at the entrance to the teaching fields, Li Luo's pace slowed down. This was because he had spotted the teacher of the 2nd school, Xu Yu. He was standing ahead of him, back straight and with the presence of a lofty mountain, severely staring at Li Luo. Li Luo sheepishly let out a smile, redoubling his pace towards him and letting out a friendly greeting. Teacher Xu. Xu Yu continued to glare at Li Luo, slight disappointment seen within his eyes. Li Luo, I know your blank palace has brought you a lot of stress. However, you should not be giving up at this last juncture. I haven't given up, Li Luo hastily replied in his defense. Then why did you take a leave of absence during this critical point? Xu Yu thundered. Everyone has been struggling to make use of every available moment to cultivate and train. You, on the other hand, took a break to rest. Li Luo felt a little helpless at his conclusion. Deep down, he also knew that Xu Yu had his best interest at heart and thus did not try to defend himself, just gaily nodding at his lecture. After a long tirade, Xu Yu eventually ended with a sigh. He gave Li Luo a deep look before turning away to walk into the teaching fields. Li Luo hurriedly followed as they entered the massive teaching fields. In the middle was a platform several tens of meters long surrounded by a circular ring of stone steps, each stacked up high. On top of the stone steps were numerous stone mats. Specifically, there was a particular young lady sitting cross-legged on one of those mats. When Li Luo entered, he was subject to the scrutiny of everyone around, his very appearance provoking numerous whispers. The elusive Li Luo who had disappeared for a week had once again become the hot topic of Southwind Academy. Li Luo disregarded the rancorous gazes and maintained his calm, heading to his assigned stone mat. Beside him sat the massively built Jiang Qing'e. Seeing him take a seat, Jiang Qing'e asked in surprise, "What happened to your hair?" Li Luo gave him a glance before casually replying, "Just dyed it." "Haven't you heard? This is called Granny Grey. Isn't it cool?" Jiao Qing'e was left speechless and his veins bulged at the nonsensical reply, seemingly wanting to ask another question. At this point, Xu Shanyue's loud voice reverberated around the field. "Good morning, students. The final examination is coming soon and I hope everyone here will redouble their efforts during this final sprint. If you're able to attend an elite college, your future will be limitless. I would also like to commend students Jiao Qing'e and Yuan Qiu. Both of them have reached the 6th seal stage, and if you two continue striving hard, it's not impossible to reach the 7th seal." Cheers and applause echoed as the rest congratulated the two. Li Luo, on the other hand, looked over with surprise. It seemed as though he was not the only one who was making improvements. After praising the two, Xu Shanyu continued with the day's lesson. Li Luo focused on the teachings with rapt attention. Today's lesson was regarding 3 resonance arts, 2 low-grade ones and 1 middle-grade one. He elaborated on all of the art's mysteries patiently, guiding people on their intricacies. Resonance arts were also split into grades similar to energy cultivation arts. The only difference was that entry-level energy cultivation arts were all lumped into one grade, whilst resonance arts were still split into low, middle, and high grades. After these 3 grades, they followed the nomenclature of General, Duke, and King stage resonance arts. Of course, such high-level resonant arts were too far off for these individuals who were still at the 10 seal stage. Even if they learned them, it might very possibly be impossible to execute these arts with their limited resonant power. Li Luo had always possessed an exceptional affinity and talent towards the learning of resonance arts. If one were to purely compare their understanding and application of resonance arts, he was extremely confident that he would be unrivaled within the entire Southwind Academy, with few being his match. As a result, it was no surprise that he quickly understood and grasped the 3 resonance arts taught by Xu Shanyu. 2 hours later, Xu Shanyu stopped their practice and made some arrangements before allowing them to rest. "All right, today's resonant art lesson will come to an end. The afternoon class will be about resonant power, so continue to cultivate quietly." Li Luo sat in his original seat, stretching like a lazy cat. Jiao Qing'e quickly sidled over and smiled. "Esteemed brother Luo, would you kindly give me pointers regarding the 3 resonance arts taught today?" Jiao Qing'e was very clear as to how gifted Li Luo was when it came to learning resonance arts. Whenever he encountered difficulties with learning these arts, he would inevitably make a beeline towards Li Luo for his assistance. Li Luo playfully scolded him. "If I guide you, will you continue to refer to me as esteemed brother Luo from now on?" Jiao Qing'e grinned mischievously, but the act of that caused him to feel pain from a bruise on his face, resulting in him clenching his teeth almost immediately after. "What's wrong with you?" Li Luo asked. Jiao Qing'e frowned as he replied, "It's all because of that scumbag Bei Kuan. I don't know why he went mad, but he's been constantly looking for trouble in the 2nd school. I couldn't take his provocations any longer and thus decided to spar against him." At this point, he pointed at a bruise on his face before arrogantly replying, "That brat didn't pull any punches, but he did not get away unscathed. That gigolo face of his was almost hammered into mush." At this point, some other students from the 2nd school gathered around and complained furiously. "That Bei Kuan is really vicious. We were just minding our own business when he came over to provoke us. Thankfully, Jiao Qing'e stepped in for us, otherwise, no one could have handled him." Jiao Qing'e waved his hand and waved toward the group who had suddenly appeared before saying to Li Luo in a low voice, "Did you aggravate that madman Bei Kuan recently? It looks like he has been looking for you." Upon hearing that, Li Luo suddenly remembered that before he took his leave of absence, that Bei Kuan fellow had indeed asked Differ Qing to pass a message on to him, inviting him to a dinner at Tower Qing Feng. He had originally just shrugged that off as a joke. Could it be that that brat had spent an entire day waiting for him? Following which, he didn't turn up to school for a week. It looked as though Bei Kuan had decided to come over to vent his frustrations in the 2nd school. Li Luo smiled and patted Jiao Qing'e's shoulder. "Could be the case. Though it looks like you've already helped me wallop him a couple of times. I don't mind. If not for those bouts of sparring, I might not have managed to break into the 6th seal stage." Jiao Qing'e loosened his shoulders at this point before continuing, "Though now that you're back, I'm sure he will be here to visit you during the afternoon resonant power class. Thinking about it, he proudly clapped his chest before announcing, "If push comes to shove, let me handle it. Perhaps a few more rounds of beating will allow me to break into the seventh seal stage." Li Luo laughed. Jiang Qing'e was direct and loyal, truly a reliable friend. He had hidden behind his friend for long enough, this just wasn't his personality or style. Hence, he replied mysteriously, "Let's talk about it when it comes to that." Noon, resonant power class. To the north of South Wind Academy was a vast and dense forest. Whenever the wind blew past, a wave of lush greenery would also be uplifted by the drafts. And within the middle of the dense forest was a massive and imposing tree. It was dark yellow in color and was over 200 meters in height, the dense branches spread out like a net made of wood. The tree branches were thick and sturdy and riddled with leaves. What was most interesting was that each leaf was almost 2 meters wide and long, as thick as a rule, almost like a mini platform of sorts. This tree was known as the Tree of Resonant Power. The Tree of Resonant Power was not a natural creation but one constructed from numerous rare treasures. This was truly a case of something being more than what meets the eye. Within the Tree of Resonant Power was an energy core. This energy core was able to absorb and store copious amounts of worldly natural energy. The large leaves of the tree were to be used as cultivation dais, each allowing for one student to cultivate on. Owning a Tree of Resonant Power was a foundational requirement for any academy, their strength depending on the might of the academy. From a certain perspective, these tree leaves were similar to Li Luo's family's cultivation room. Of course, if one were to compare efficacy, the sky gold room within Li Luo's old manor would be significantly better. Though this was because Li Luo was fortunate and most students did not possess such a wondrous background. The Tree of Resonant Power's leaves were also split into 3 grades: gold leaves, silver leaves, and bronze leaves. If one were to look from afar, they would notice that 60% of the leaves were bronze leaves, 30% were silver leaves, and only 10% were gold leaves. The gold leaves were all situated at the top of the tree and were relatively smaller in number. Obviously, being able to cultivate atop a gold leaf would inevitably be more advantageous compared to a lesser grade. However, the gold leaves were mostly monopolized by the students of the first school. This was inevitable as the students were stronger, and the face of the academy. Hence, when it came to the second school, there were only 10 gold leaves up for grabs, with the third school and the fourth school having no chance to even contest for this precious resource. These gold leaves were truly in demand. The Tree of Resonant Power was only open for cultivation for half a day. Whenever the clock above the tree rang out, that would mean the start of the cultivation session. This was the most anticipated part of each day for every student. Hence, once the clock rang out, the hordes of students would rush into the dense forest excitedly like a human wave, jubilant looks on their faces. They would ascend the tree via the wooden ladder that snaked around the trunk like a python as quickly as they could. Li Luo followed the mass of people and ascended the tree as well. He stared awkwardly at the 10 gold leaves that belonged to the second school. One used to be reserved for him, but that was back when he was the strongest within the school, bar Jiang Qing'e. However, because of his blank palace, he had taken the initiative to give up his slot and thus he no longer had a place. He also felt embarrassed to reclaim the seat he had given away. Forget it. Let's just use what I can, Li Luo thought to himself as he walked towards a silver leaf. Just as Li Luo approached the silver leaf, a gaze full of mixed expressions from the peak of the tree landed upon him. This video will end here.